School of Architecture is to host discussions around topics that are important to a lot of schools and research units around the campus, and bring people from across campus, and in this case from the city and even from different schools, to have, in some ways, kind of an informal discussion, but a kind of lively discussion around a topic that is, that's, again, very important and related to a lot of different schools and disciplines. So today's topic is on smart cities. And Dennis Shelden is put this together, so thank you, Dennis, for doing that. We'll be moderating. Dennis, most of you know, is the new director of the Digital Building Lab and associate professor. So I'm going to let him do the introductions to the panelists. So Dennis, you take it away.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to do about maybe 10 or 15 minutes of slides, mostly images, just to kind of throw some ideas out to frame the kind of discussion about smart cities. Then we'll introduce the panelists. They'll each go for about 20 minutes or so, I hope, plus or minus. And then we'll talk, and then we'll open for discussion. So let's get right into it. Okay. Smart cities is a very hot topic right now. Somebody said recently this is the year of smart cities. There are all kinds of initiatives going on around the country. Jennifer will probably talk about the Obama-driven initiatives. But there's an awful lot going on around that comes under this rubric of smart cities, so much that it's actually kind of hard to figure out what we're even talking about. So what I wanted to do is just kind of throw out a couple of ideas that frame the spectrum of the kind of things that people are talking about under this heading of smart cities. But again, there's a sort of collective sense that this kind of intelligence in the urban environment, sensors, smart cars, autonomous vehicles, traffic lights, pedestrian tracking, all that kind of stuff is part of the kind of the current vernacular and really one of the kind of the new technology forces. And so let me kind of raise some thoughts about that. I'm not a cities person. I'm not an urban planner. I'm not really a sensor or kind of city infrastructure person. My background, as many of you know, is buildings, but really building data and the kind of the process of taking design information to construction, to engineering, to construction, and then just starting to get into the idea that we can actually use those models somehow in the context of actual sort of occupancy, facilities management, all that kind of stuff. Increasingly, let's see, the web is a part of everyday urban experience that's now moving on mobile phones. This data from the building level, from the city level, is something that you can actually access now online. You can access it on your phone. It starts connecting to this idea of sort of public information and into the actual ways that buildings are kind of operated and understood by both humans and computers. So this is just kind of a spectrum of kind of my history about this kind of smart, intelligent infrastructure world, again, more at the building scale. And just to suffice to say that I and the firms I've been associated with have worked on, if not cities, and we have done some of that, but certainly large, kind of, what do you want to call them, sort of landmark buildings that impact the possibility of what a city is and what a building means in the context of an urban intervention. I'm going to throw out this very kind of short, well, not that short, hopefully concise definition of what a smart city is. So smart city initiatives draw on data-enriched infrastructure to create better government services, civic life, and community. So I'm going to play around with those terms a little bit, but there's certainly this idea about data and information that's now actually part of the city, part of the government services. Infrastructure, buildings, roads, stuff underground, even stuff flying overhead, and really the intent to ultimately somehow improve life and make communities better, often by making government services somehow much more accessible and much more immediate. So the questions I think are relevant to everybody, specifically design professionals, are how will this affect things? How does it affect civic life? There's many of you, whether you call it digital life or not, are online and dealing with communities in kind of the virtual space. What does it mean when the virtual community starts interfacing with the physical community? How do governments, designers, address that information? I don't think we've done a very good job of understanding what social media and those kind of technologies mean to the design of buildings and the design of cities. It's coming to us whether we want it or not, and ultimately how does that affect the built environment, efficiencies maybe around the environment and global pollution and warming, and things like actually economic distribution. Who profits from this kind of information? Who is this something that is good for the common person, good for the government, good for companies and for-profit companies, and hopefully good for all of us. So these are the questions that I really should answer. Just a little bit of, again, my background. There was a studio that I ran with Frank Gehry, who actually had, this is at UCLA, he had an experience on this thing called Skylab. You have to pretty much be my age to know what that thing was. But it was a very small precursor to the International Space Station. And at the time, this would have been designed in the 1970s, there was this question about how you could take the life of a collection of people, put it on a rocket ship and send it into space. Everything had to be much smaller, much more efficient. You had to deal with the cycle of waste. What are you going to do with that? Can you recycle kind of on the fly? And everything's super compact. And there was a sense at the time that would drive the possibility for new types of urban interventions and building interventions. That really didn't happen. So just to give you some visuals, this is obviously the evolution. Obviously, the evolution of digital technology and computers, which at the same time, this might be the 50s, but this is the ENIAC computer, the size of a room. Spin forward 10 or 20 years later, you've got things the size of a closet, things the size of a desk, things the size that you can put in your pocket, things that are so small that basically this is a computer that is the size of your USB drive. It's a full computer, can access devices and things like that. It's called an Arduino compatible. Some of you may have seen it, if not, hopefully you'll take a class on it if you're interested. But it's basically getting down to the size of, they're vanishing, they're so small. How are building mechanical systems doing? Well, in the 70s, they're about this size. They're still this size, right? So the distribution systems, the services of buildings have not taken advantage of this technology, what's called Moore's Law, the ever-increasing efficiency and scaling of these systems. I think that the built environment is starting to catch up. So, in the arc of my career, you could look out at other disciplines, mechanical engineering, computer science, and say, well, that's happening now, so in 10 years that will have an impact on the architectural professions. Things like parametric modeling, things like that. These technologies are starting to impact the profession much quicker, and that's very exciting, and yet we really don't have an answer for the kind of whole-scale order of magnitude efficiencies of these kinds of technologies. They're still, maybe 50% more efficient than they were, but not much more. Infrastructure, most of it is circulation. A lot of buildings are circulation. A lot of cities are circulation. It's really distribution, not use. And that's also starting to evolve with new technologies as well. This is a little bit of a, take it for what you will. You can see this as a metaphor. This is a building information model. This is thanks to one of our new students, Kurt, who's actually done chip design. This is a view of an actual kind of microcomputer, microprocessor, and the layers of gates and information, the physical layers of these tiny devices. The city of New York, the grid system there. Okay, maybe this is just kind of a throwaway, but I actually believe that the ways physical infrastructure and digital information systems are being designed will converge, and there will be this kind of synergy and duality between thinking about how the structural beams and mechanical systems, the spaces themselves, how they interact, and those systems will increasingly come with digital computers, digital devices built in, and there will be more than a metaphorical relationship between these types of systems. They will actually be co-designed together. Meanwhile, what we're trying to figure out all this, clearly industry is driving to solutions for smart cities, whether we're ready for them or not. And so, you all work with this kind of stuff. Google Maps has transformed my life. I used to spend half the time in a new city being lost. That doesn't happen anymore. That's a great thing. Obviously, these guys are now starting to look at autonomous transportation systems, and for each of these there is an economic, set of decisions. And again, industry is moving much faster than I think culture or government can, is moving in sort of understanding these things. So really, it's up to the people in this room and the communities that we represent to kind of catch up and drive these decisions and questions, not just necessarily let sort of the laissez-faire approach to technology development drive us. What will urban digital physical life look like? There are these, obvious, very tired analogies. Will it all be like Times Square? Will it all be like Minority Report? Augmented reality with advertisements everywhere. Will it all be somehow? This is obviously, I haven't played it yet, but it seems to have just taken over not just sort of a set of culture, but it's actually becoming, you have to watch out if you're driving not to bump into one of these people. So obviously there is an urban impact on these kind of things, and again, this is just a hint of what's to come. And then finally, what is the life of a citizen in this new digital, physical, embedded, information-rich world? I think people have probably caught this on the news. These are the new internet kiosks that are all around New York City. People are just sort of camping out in front of these things now, so making them home. What will the distribution of economic privilege be like when we have this ubiquitous information? These are the kind of the obvious questions. What will the role of the citizen be? Who will be empowered? How will that power and the economic privilege behind it be distributed? So that's just a couple of images to get us started. I hope that dovetails with what our panelists are about to talk about. I just wanted to do one more thing. This is kind of a management consulting matrix. I've taken these terms. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this. But if you look at kind of the kind of interpretations of smart cities, at one level when we talk about cities, we're clearly talking about infrastructure, the physical city itself. On another level, we're talking about communities and governments that are independent or decoupled from the physical infrastructure that they are, that they occupy, but clearly related. This whole smart thing has a couple of interpretations. One is just, better. So when we think about smart cities, in some ways we're talking about better cities. We're also talking about, data as an integral component, information technology as an integral component of the city infrastructure and of the government services that are provided. So I think this is a good way of sort of segmenting, what are now an awful lot of new kind of concepts, Internet of Things, government portals, access to information, autonomous vehicles, urban planning itself. Maybe just a reasonable kind of map to think about how everything kind of goes together, and also to kind of avoid confusion when my view of smart cities isn't the same as yours, and we sit there and debate about whether or not it's this box or that box. It's all of those boxes and probably a lot more. So let's just keep going with this. So that's, I think, what I have. Let me start off and introduce the three distinguished panelists en masse, and then just to get that out of the way, and then we'll invite them up kind of one at a time. So we're glad to have Torri Martin from the City of Atlanta government. He's the director of what's called Smart ATL, It's an office within the Atlanta Information Management Department whose mission is to advance and implement smart city initiatives throughout the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta is a leader in smart cities initiatives, and I think that's an incredible opportunity for Georgia Tech, and actually one of the compelling reasons why I came here. It's just they seem to be really serious about this and also serious about the relationship with Georgia Tech. Mr. Martin joined the city of Atlanta in June of 2015 as a senior project manager in the Mayor's Office of Information Delivery and Performance, but was quickly promoted to be the interim director of the Fiber Atlanta Services team, and he's now director of the, quote, newly formed Smart ATL, where he's responsible for centralizing the city of Atlanta's smart city strategy and ensuring that the infrastructure to support Smart ATL and these services is in place. He's a former White House intern for the Obama administration, where he oversaw the technology operations for the District of Columbia Public Schools and served as chief of staff and assistant to the mayor of the city of Fairbairn, Georgia. He's got a bachelor's degree in business administration from Georgia State University, a master's in public administration from Troy University. He's a certified public manager and is currently working toward a Juris Doctorate from John Marshall School of Law. Jennifer Clark should be familiar to many of you. She's an associate professor of public policy and director of Georgia Tech Center of Urban Innovation, an interdisciplinary research center that impacts a lot of us, including myself. She's the current editor of the journal Regional Studies and vice chair of the Economic Geography Specialty Group of the American Association of Geographers. She earned her PhD from Cornell, an MS from the Hubert Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota, and a BA from Wesleyan. She's written and co-authored 3 books, including Working Regions, Reconnecting Innovation and Production in the Knowledge Economy, Remaking Regional Economies, Power, Labor, and Firm Strategies in the Knowledge Economy, and the 3rd edition of Basic Methods of Policy Analysis and Planning, a widely adopted text in policy and planning courses. She's written more than 30 articles and book chapters, and she teaches urban and regional economic development theory, analysis, and practice, as well as regional design and methods. Finally, we're delighted to have convinced Sarah Williams to come down to join us for the day. She's an assistant professor of urban planning and the director of the Civic Data Design Lab at MIT in the School of Architecture and Planning. Before that, she was co-director of the Spatial Information Design Lab at Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture and Planning and Preservation. She's trained as a geographer at Clark University, landscape architect from the University of Pennsylvania, and urban planning at MIT, and her work combines geographic analysis and design. Her design work has been widely exhibited, including work at the Guggenheim Museum of Modern Art in New York City. She's won numerous awards, including being named one of the top 25 planners in technology and the 2012 Game Changer by Metropolis Magazine. Her current work, I think, as I've also said, is where it says currently on view in MoMA in New York, and will be part of an upcoming exhibit at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York, opening in September. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, and let's have Torri come in.
Testing. Oh, that's okay. How are you guys doing this afternoon? I just want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you, Dennis, for inviting me out to speak. I've given this presentation now probably about 20 times. Myself and Jennifer, we've been traveling quite frequently to different conferences, giving these different presentations on these various topics. So let's just jump right into it. I don't know if I can give you 20 minutes, but I'll give you a good 12.
Just ask more hard questions.
So I just want to start off by giving a little brief general overview of the region and why it positions the city of Atlanta to be a leader in the smart city realm. So if you take a look at some of the statistics I have over on the right-hand side, most of the U.S. population live in the eastern third of the country. and the Southeast region has a pretty large GDP. It's actually the largest that we've come to see just by talking with the White House and different organizations. We have about $3.6 trillion in GDP, and we're the fourth largest economy based on GDP out of all countries globally. So if we wanted to be a country ourselves, we'll be number 4. So that's pretty awesome. And then also 50% of the nation's net population migration is migrating to our region. So that is gonna, one, open up new opportunities for new interaction with citizens, but it also causes constraints on current government services because we don't have the infrastructure in place to support this growth. So here's just some more specific statistics around the metro Atlanta area. So Georgia's GDP itself is about $460 billion, and the bulk of that is actually the metro Atlanta area. We account for about $300 billion of that. So we're the economic driving force for the state. Also, we have a population of approximately 5.5 million. It's the second largest metro area in the Southeast region, and it's the 8th largest in the United States. So what's been happening in the city? So if you take a look at this graph, this chart, you see that we have a lot of new construction, a lot of new building permits that's happening in the city. And so this is a large driver of the population migration. Businesses are starting to relocate down to the Southeast, and they're actually calling Atlanta their home. So that is what's sparking a lot of this growth and a lot of this new transition and migration to the South. And then also one of the interesting things that we're seeing is that the millennial population, of course, is growing and increasing. And so with that comes the difference in services that usually be provided. Millennials more so love technology. They don't need that more personal interaction as older generations do. So what have we done? So back in January of this year, we did a citizen survey to kind of see what the residents and what the customers and what the visitors thought was the major issues with the city. So if you take a look at it, we broke it out into quadrants. And if you look at it, the northern part of the city viewed transportation and infrastructure as their biggest concerns. And then they saw public safety as the second. But if you take a look at the South, it kind of flip-flopped a little bit. You see that crime in the South is their biggest concern, and then transportation was number 2. So this information that we did from the survey, it led us to what we're calling our 6 pillars of what it takes Atlanta to become a smart city. So we're focusing on mobility, economic growth, citizen engagement, environmental and water, public safety, and smart government. And when we talk about mobility, we talk about not just the movement of cars, but we also want to include bicycles, pedestrians, even people different modes of transportation is what I'm trying to say. So we want to incorporate everything and not just be totally vehicle focused or vehicle driven, because a lot of people, especially on the southern side, they have the lack of transportation. So we want to address that issue as well. And so a lot of you guys know that in November, we're actually going to have a referendum for the T-Splice. And so some of that money will go to help build out the MARTA capabilities to help with some of this multimodal transportation. We also want to talk about economic growth, because without the economic growth part of it, smart city is going to be a little hard, because the economic growth is more so talking about what businesses are coming to your community, what businesses are willing to invest. So we're looking at really trying to move the needle on that. We're interacting with the business community just the same way we're interacting with the citizen and community as well. And then if we go to citizen engagement, this is actually something that's near and dear to my heart. When I took this position, I told them that I wanted this to be a central pillar of this strategy, just because you need to know what your customer wants before you give it to them. You can always throw stuff out there and then say, hey, what do you think about this? But that's not the right way to do it. If you really want to do something that's meaningful and impactful, you actually want to get them involved in the process at the beginning and not at the end. So our approach is to have this embedded into this process from beginning to end, and constantly change and constantly survey and constantly make adjustments based off their needs. Environmental water is pretty simple. We want to reduce pollution. We want to be responsible citizens. We also want to increase water quality and conservation. So we want to do our part to protect the environment as well. Public safety is always one of the key pillars in any city that you're going to go. You're going to usually always see something around public safety and mobility, and that's no different here. And then smart government, how can we do things better? How can we make the customer experience a lot better? How can we decrease the amount of time that you spend on the phone trying to get an issue resolved? That's what that's all about. So, to the city of Atlanta, to me and to the people that I have to report to, we kind of boiled down the definition of a smart city as we, the city, collectively leverage a strategic and data-centric approach to improve mobility, public safety, and sustainability that ultimately enhances the citizen well-being and foster the economic growth of our city. So it's kind of similar to the definition that Dennis had up. So I was glad to see that we're all on the same page, is that we want to use the data that we're going to be collecting from these new technologies, these new devices, to really make sound decisions. And that's going to lead us to what we're going to call the 3 Ps, which is prescriptive, descriptive, and I forgot the other P right now, but I get to it in another second. So what did we do? So back in May, they created my office. And my office was created to centralize the process for Smart City. Before taking this role, there was a number of different departments that had things that they classified as smart or innovative. So what we wanted to do, we actually brought all of those projects in-house. We ranked them, categorized them. We wanted to make sure they fit in certain criteria, like they met a mayoral priority, they have funding already allocated for it, the number of citizens that actually impacted. So we took all of this data, and so we really have a robust program now that we can actually manage. And we also can prioritize it based off, hey, we have funding, we don't have funding, or there's future funding available for it. And so this leads to the 3 applications of what we really want to do with Smart City. So the first one is we want to gain that situational intelligence. So that we want to be able to, in real time, be able to make great decisions. And this is really important for our public safety team. We never want to send them into harm without adequate information. So one of our primary goals is to make sure that we have, for instance, public safety cameras deployed so that when our police department or our fire team, they respond, that we're able to give them the most amount of information that we possibly can to enable them to do their job. The second one is the decisions that we make from the data that we're getting will optimize our operation. That's really what it is. It's making it more efficient. And then what you get from that efficiency is the predictive, where now you're able to do the preventative maintenance. And that way, we don't have to wait for a customer to call us and tell us that we have street lights out, which is the current process that we have to do. We have no communication with any of our traffic lights or with our street lights. So we literally have to wait for a citizen to call us and say, hey, we need you to come reset the traffic light, or hey, we have a traffic light, we have a street light out. So this leads to another important facet of our smart city. We're looking at data as another utility. And what does that mean? That means we're going to have all of these different data sources that we're actually partnering with Georgia Tech to help us store, govern, and manage it. So working with Dr. Peterson's office, we're coming up with a strategy of how we can have all of these different information pool into this one, what we're calling data store, to where it can serve city services providers, also give capabilities for citizens to come in and interact with the information. But then at the same time, we inspire citizens to create businesses, to do something, to develop solutions to address the problems that they find out from the data, and then also for the city operational services. And so this just goes into more of what we're trying to do when we're building out this data store. We're going to develop APIs that allows people to interface with the information to call upon this different data at different intervals of time. and really turn it into an actual economic generation for the city and for their communities. So here's our step to becoming a smart city. Like I said, we don't want to just be the city that's buy a lot of technology and to deploy it. So we came up with a process and an approach of how we can do it in the most effective way. And so what we're calling it the 6 C's. And we have like 6 C's, 3 P's, and some other things. But so the first C is going to be capture. So what is capture? Capture is actually what ICT technology we're going to be using to communicate this information. So that's where we use the sensors and we attach it to fiber. So the city right now is currently investing into a municipal fiber network. And so we're planning over the next 5 years to deploy about 300 miles of fiber. And so that is going to be the backbone, our communication backbone to relay all of this data to wherever we need it to go. Then we're going to go over to the next block, which is the collaboration and crunch, which is the partnership that we have with Georgia Tech. So we're going to be partnering with them to take this information, do different type of analytics on it, and develop solutions that we then can configure and control, which is basically just deploy it into the city, test it out, get some information from it, make changes if we need to, and then go back through this iterative process. So where are we today? So what we're doing is we're starting out with a smart intersection. Then from a smart intersection, we go to a smart corridor. And then from a smart corridor, we go to a smart city district. So currently, our smart intersection is actually not too far away from here. It's at Spring and North Avenue. So what we've currently done, we've put up some traffic cameras that's helping us do traffic analytics right now. And then we've also deployed a Georgia Tech sensor box, which is currently collecting a lot of information. It's collecting about 10 different things, if I'm not mistaken, Jennifer. And so we're studying that. We're making adjustments to it as needed. And over the next couple of months, we're going to end up deploying another 68 cameras down the whole corridor of North Avenue, which is going to stretch from North Side all the way to Moreland. And then we're also going to be deploying another 4 sensor boxes over the next 3 months as well. So like I said, we picked North Avenue as our demonstration project. And the reason we picked North Avenue is because of just the different dynamics of people from one end to the other end. If you start over here to this end, to the North Side, Drive side, you have Coca-Cola, you have Georgia Tech, you have the varsity. So you have a large mixture of people coming for different reasons. You have a business community, and then you also have an educational institution. But as you travel all the way down, you have residential, then you go to Punt City Market, where you have another cool, hippish type area, and then you also have the Beltline that intersects North Avenue as well. So this just seemed to be a great testing spot for us to test out our strategy. So here's just some of the challenges that we currently face on North Avenue. We have like I said earlier, we have no traffic signal communication, peak congestion at multiple intersections. We have no situational awareness. We did some analytics on some of the crime statistics, and we found out that it was high on vehicle larceny, simple assault, and vandalism were the 3 highest things that happen along the corridor. We also have an aging water main and distribution infrastructure, which we're currently going to be deploying some sensors over the next few months to help with some of the leakage that the city has. And so then we also have potential opportunities. With this being a major corridor, and then we also have in MARTA right there, and MARTA also has about 5 different bus routes that run. There's no reason for us to be able to make a great impact from a mobility standpoint. And then when you look at it from the public safety side, what we're going to start doing over the next few weeks is we're partnering with Georgia Tech as well, again on this one, and we're going to start engaging citizens in the neighborhood to kind of see, hey, what type of technology do you want? What are the actual things that you think will make you feel safer, or what are the things that you're lacking? So we really, like I said, want to get that citizen engagement component in there so we can really move the needle. And then the air quality portion of it is working with, once again, with the sensor boxes that we have deployed. We're going to look to see what we can do to actually move the needle on that. And so, just wrapping it up, this is what we see North Avenue to look like over the next year of this pilot. We're going to have big belly trash cans, which helps from a waste management standpoint. We're trying to get kiosks. We're talking with different vendors to see how we can get kiosks deployed down on North Avenue. We're also going to be doing a bicycle lane over the next year as well, and then we're upgrading our traffic infrastructure. So we're currently now working on a project to where we're going to switch out all the old traffic heads and put in smart traffic heads. We're going to add, like I said earlier, traffic cameras to help with the traffic analytics, so that way the traffic controllers can communicate to one another without the need of human interaction. And we're just going to see how we can really move this needle. This is a very ambitious project that the mayor is really supportive of, and so we're just looking to really demonstrate to the city what we can do. And then just to end it off, I just wanted to show that we can't do this alone. So these are the different partners that we're working with throughout the city to help move this forward. And we're just looking to expand this as we move forward. Thank you.
Dennis to change my slide deck for me, so I apologize for doing that to everybody. Yeah. Let's see if that's it. And I'm really glad that Torri went first, because although I've seen that presentation a number of times, I know that for everyone, really seeing what's happening on the ground in Atlanta is absolutely critical to understanding where we are, which is that we're in real time doing this, and Atlanta is taking a lead in doing this, and it's actually one of the things that's critically important for the regional competitiveness of Atlanta. And I think that's the thing that I really want to talk about a bit here, is about why it is so important that this investment happen, and what it actually means to smart cities as the development of an industry, right? So I come from an industry studies background. I work in economic geography and economic development, and one of the things that I've always thought was really interesting about smart cities is how we're seeing an industry develop, an enabling industry that has real applications in the public sector context. So one of the things I just want to share with you, and I won't make you look at too much text, my colleagues presenting today have many more images, but given my disciplinary background, you're going to have a little bit of words on the slides here. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that this is one of the things that we're doing here, is that if we look at this through an enabling industry lens, what we're actually seeing is the design, development, and deployment of an emerging class of products and systems, right? So for those of us who work in a context like Georgia Tech, this should not sound like news, right? We work on enabling technologies and the question of how those diffuse into private markets all day long, all over campus, right? So this is another one of those sorts of moments where we're looking at a change and an incremental and in some cases disruptive moment in an industry, right? And the industry here is really the intersection between information and communication technologies and urban infrastructure as we previously sort of knew it. And I think that the big distinction here is that the market context here involves cities, so place-based public sector, right? So that's really different. We're not talking about technology transfer into just the private sector. We're talking about technology transfer into the public sector more broadly, and that's complex for a number of different ways. And so one of the things we first have to figure out is who are the producers of these, who are the products and who are the actors who produce these things? What are the processes by which the technology diffusion is actually happening? How's that upgrading happening? And then what's the approach that's being taken here? So the products are a complicated set of products, as Torri was just alluding to. Some of them are objects, some of them are systems, some of them are applications. It's a big universe of products, but typically what we're looking at is service-embedded infrastructure with public service applications, and there's both institutional and citizen users involved. The actor network, and those of you who were looking at the various icons that Torri has on the presentation of all the different partners and all the different actors, for those of us who have sort of a history of working with cities, it gets very complex very, very quickly, right? And one of the ones I want to call your attention to, beyond the fact that we're looking at public and private and civic intermediaries, we're also looking at philanthropic intermediaries. And when I say philanthropic, I mean that very large foundations, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, are very involved in setting the priorities in smart cities applications. Foundations like the Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Rockefeller Foundation, and other very, very large international foundations. So the process and the approach that we see happening is really, in most cities, what we're seeing is a testbed approach where selected places and selected technologies are being deployed in real time. And we saw that the North Avenue testbed is our initial effort in the city of Atlanta to work on an explicit testbed. So part of this, we end up with some questions about how these cities become smart and where the smart cities actually are. And if we think about this from an economic development perspective, the question of interjurisdictional competition, we think about how we attract firms and human capital to different cities and regions based on what the underlying assets are, including technology capabilities. Here we are again in that environment, right? If you have a smart city, you will be economically successful. City is the premise behind that. So the next question is, how do we select cities to be smart, right? And as it turns out, we do that in a very particular way, and we privilege particular places. The Metro Lab network that Torri was mentioning, which is the city-university partnership between the city of Atlanta and Georgia Tech for the purposes of working on smart cities, is one of 34 city-university partnerships in the country. Those 34 cities, because of those partnerships, have a lot more access to resources and information than cities that have not stood up to make those partnerships happen. So the next question is then, how are the use and demonstration cases selected? This is an interesting question. And there tend to be technology hierarchies that occur there as well that we should be paying attention to. And then there's also the question of open innovation here and about how open access and open data and open platforms develop over time. Some of these new markets and actually create new forms of privatization. And then, of course, we have that limits our spaces for social entrepreneurship. Right? So there's really kind of two ways to look at the open innovation piece here, and one is sort of a bottom-up effort, and the other is a top-down. And I'll start actually with top-down rather than bottom-up. Top-down is where we see the industry-led initiatives in the smart city space, where we see firms or consortiums of firms say, this is what we have, these are the systems we have available for cities to adopt, and this is what they can do to enable your smart city, right? So it redeploys urban form and urban infrastructure is part of what the premise is there. And it prioritizes systems optimization issues, whether it's ICT or power systems, and by power I mean energy systems. Now the bottom up one is an interesting one that I think a lot of our students are familiar with, certainly my students are very familiar with this, is the idea of the sort of social and civic entrepreneurship behind ideas like doing hackathons and crowdsourcing and developing apps through things like Code for America, right, where the priority really there is the connectivity, mobility, accessibility, and really iterating off of what is actually the existing urban form and existing infrastructure. So the idea there isn't to rebuild the city. The idea is to make the city a place where people can actually be more functional and it works more efficiently. And that's very much user-driven, right, or citizen-driven, dependent on your orientation. So it's really interesting to watch how these case studies are being set up. There's some analysis of this in the policy literature. We've started to refer to this as fast policy because God knows most policy is really slow. This is really a fast policy where we see rapid diffusion where, Torri or I will go to something where we'll see Kansas City have a gigabit city model and we'll say, wow, we could do that here, we'll do that fast. So it doesn't go from the policy model that we used to see, which is pilot case, that then is actually validated through an evaluation strategy and then is actually taken up to, say, the federal government, and the federal government validates it again and then diffuses it out to the 50 states. That's not how this is happening. This is happening horizontally across places, which is a distinct sort of policy model. Now, the city selection issue and how cities and technologies are selected is one of the things I want to share with you today, right? So selecting cities, here's one of the ways this happens. Through philanthropic competitions, right? And when I say philanthropic competitions, what I'm talking about is cities are selected or they're asked to compete for resources by a funding source. In this case, and this is the map that Bloomberg innovation teams, the different innovation teams, put together of who won the first, I think it's the first couple rounds, right? And you can see Atlanta is right in the center there, which is convenient for our purposes. But what ends up happening here is that the Bloomberg Philanthropies selected particular cities and then made investments in them in terms of providing some capacity to actually implement smart cities. So there's also the Rockefeller, and I apologize for the overlap there, the 100 Resilient Cities project from Rockefeller. This is actually the city of Atlanta just is launching this on Monday. It was selected in the third round, and you can see the list of the third round. So it really is 100 resilient cities. This is an international network, and one of the things that happens when you win this is something you had to win. You had to put in an application and win it. One of the things that you get is you get access to these private sector partners who provide technical assistance, in addition to actually getting a resilience officer put within your city who can actually manage that part of the effort. So then, of course, we have public sector networks, not to be outdone by the philanthropic private sector. In the May through September of last year, of 2015, the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House decided that it made sense to have a public sector initiated a network created of city-university partnerships. And this is indeed the MetroLab network that Georgia Tech and the City of Atlanta, as well as Georgia State, are part of the founding members of this network. And the real intention here is back to this question of technology diffusion, right? What is the mechanism for doing the design and development side of new technologies and then partnering for the deployment? So those of you who are a part of, say, the manufacturing or look at other technologies, this is exactly the same model. The idea that design and development happens in the university sector and deployment happens in the industry, or in this case in the public sector. So what do the competitions in the public sector look like? Well, we've only had one so far, really. And the one that we had was the DOT Smart City Challenge. This was a $50 million Smart City Challenge that came out maybe late November, right after the US DOT bill passed. They announced this challenge. And you'll note here that there are 7 cities in this map that are highlighted. Those were the 7 cities that were selected at South by Southwest in Austin in March to be finalists for this $50 million. And then the one winner turned out to be Columbus, Ohio, which was announced, I think, May, June. What? Oh, okay. It's like 5 cities? 5, yeah, okay. No, so and Columbus, in fact, ended up winning that with somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million of local private sector money leveraging their application. So one of the things my research group was interested in was, gee, I wonder how the distribution of all of these selections and what is actually playing out across the United States. Are we in fact seeing sort of an uneven distribution of who gets selected as your smart city? And we did the map in November with everybody who had won awards of one kind or another, and you can see what the map looked like in November, and then the way that the map looks in June. These are very simple maps. Now, the good news for us today and for Torri is that the dot for Atlanta always looks pretty big, which means that every time one of these things comes up, Atlanta gets on the map, so to speak, in this idea. So I will just breeze through selecting technologies. There's a similar set of questions about actors and processes to ask about which technologies get prioritized and under what conditions, and it does change the issues in terms of whether requirements in terms of urban infrastructure are light connectivity or distributed power, or whether they are in fact really large requirements like what I call heavy connectivity, which is redoing your entire fiber network, right? as opposed to some of the other options. So to give you a sense of what smart cities objects, which tend to have light requirements, this is actually on campus, right? Some people have probably seen this. The trash cans that Torri was talking about, one variation on that is over there. If you want to have something to plug in, a park bench to plug in your cell phone to recharge, which may end up very much like the link in NY. But in any case, so these are some examples of the objects in the smart city context. And these are examples of some of the really, really big cities that are these large-scale distribution projects, like the one that really do urban operating system activities. So there are also corporate networks that are evolving, and I'll just say 2 words about this. Is that simply the consortiums, some of them are built by philanthropies, some of them are built by the public sector, others are built by private sector as well. I think that one of the things for those of us who study cities and regions, one of the really interesting observable absences, as I say in this discourse, is that there's no talk of regionalism or regional governance really going on. The city is the central actor in the discussion about smart cities, and by city, the administrative jurisdiction of the city is really the piece of this. The question of how we construct market barriers in this space is one that's going on in real time, and for the purposes of not saying anything out of school, I won't say anything about it. And then I think that one of the really interesting things we have to understand is that what ends up happening when we have this uneven development, when we create core and periphery places by investing unevenly in them, what we end up doing is creating problems in terms of economic competitiveness. Now, for the cities that win, it's great. For the cities who don't get on the board, they're going to be adopting technologies that were ultimately developed for cities that had different needs, different communities, and different constituencies. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, how is everybody? So how many of you are planners? Oh, great. And architects? Half and half, maybe more architects. So hopefully
some tech folks. Too.
some tech folks, computer science, computer. People and technology. I like that. People and technology. We should all be people and technology. We've all heard that the rise of big data is going to change the world. But I believe big data will not change the world unless it's collected and synthesized into tools that have a public benefit. So I run something called the Civic Data Design Lab at MIT, and I take spreadsheets, data, mysterious data sets that look like this, and I translate them into images which I hope can affect urban policy. And I use this image that I made with Laura Kurgan when I was running the Spatial Information Design Lab, because I think has a long history of its effect in policy. This is an image showing how much it costs to incarcerate people in Brownsville, New York. And in fact, these 17 blocks, it costs $17 million to incarcerate people. And the idea is to show the amount of money we spend in some neighborhoods in the city, but we don't provide the resources that underlying the systemic issues involved with that. And so these maps appeared in the Museum of Modern Art. And this actually map is showing how much, where prisoners lived before they went to prison, and where they went to prison to try to illustrate kind of the mass amount of money leaving Brooklyn, New York. But some people saw these maps in the exhibit And actually, they were used in Congress in the Reinvestment Act of 2010 to argue for reentry programming. And so one of the things that my lab tries to do is use visualizations of data to try to affect policy in this kind of way. One of the three things that I'm really interested in is a call for data literacy. I think we have more open data and more people have access to it, but if we don't have people literate in using that data, we are going to have still some of the marginalizing effects associated with power and control of data. I think we need to make a call for new data visualization and collection tools. We all hold little cell phones in our hands that are collecting data. As we heard in both the talks, now there's wireless sensors across the city, and these tools can be used to affect communities. And then finally, I think we need to make a call for private data for public good. About 80% of the data that we now store is privately owned, and a lot of that data has a possible public benefit. And so we need to create policies around how to use that for a public benefit without also exposing privacy concerns. I'm going to mostly focus on area two data tools for collection and telling the stories of communities, but I'd be happy to talk to you about any of these other areas. In fact, my exhibition at the Cooper Hewitt, which will be at the end of the month, is actually a data literacy tool that I created for New York City public schools, and it uses data and data visualization to help teach high school students how to work with data sets. So as we have these devices at our fingertips, and I like to tell stories, I'm going to tell you a story that I worked on in Nairobi, Kenya. This is a partnership with the University in Nairobi, Columbia University, Sustainable Center for Urban Development, the Civic Data Design Lab, a local technology firm in Nairobi called GroupShot, and is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And it really starts with the premise that Nairobi suffers from severe congestion problems. This is what the streets of Nairobi look like every day. Traffic is at a standstill. And I've worked on a lot of transportation models. I made the first GIS data set for Nairobi in 2005, trying to model traffic and transportation flow in the city. This is actually a land use data set that I created from satellite imagery, kind of looking at density across Nairobi. One thing you can see is the very high density of some of the informal settlements in the city. But one of the things I didn't have when I was running my model was information on matatus. And these are essentially the informal transit system. They are the main public transit system in Nairobi. And about 3.5 million people depend on these 130 matatu routes to get around the city. And I'd just like to give a video of what a matatu is.
If you wouldn't know better, you could be in a club or a bar, but you're not. You're in a minibus driving through Nairobi. And with volumes like this, you'd better not go on an empty stomach. On the outside, they're painted in odd designs. And their name matatu is derived from the Kiswahili words for 3 cents for a ride, which nowadays is more like 30 cents. The fares are raised by the conductors. Traveling by matatu is a daily reality for millions of Kenyans.
So as you can see, matatus are really a part of Nairobi's culture. They're essential to how they get around. But people don't actually know the bus routes and where they are. And so what we wanted to do is really think about how we could generate a map of this data set. And so we went to City Council, and this is where they had information. Obviously, this is not 130 routes, and it's only telling you the beginning and end of each one of these routes. And so we wanted to create raw data for our transportation model to make a better, efficient system for the city, but data for everyone, something that people could use to actually navigate the city. And cell phones are really a big part of Nairobi culture. They use them for everything. In fact, mobile cash is used even on some matatus. This is M-Pesa system where you can send cell phone minutes to pay for things. And we thought, how could we leverage the ubiquitous nature of cell phone use in Nairobi, Kenya, to actually track the public transit system and open that data up for anyone to use and build upon. And so we created an app on cell phones, and this is actually one of the University of Nairobi students riding a matatu. We collected the data in something called GTFS. Does anybody know what GTFS is? 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's like more than normal, actually. But almost all of you have used GTFS. When you are on Google Maps and you route yourself on public transport, the back end data is in a GTFS system. We collected our data for Nairobi in that system so that we could build on top of it. Using data standards is really important, and we were able to use a lot of open source software because we use this GTFS standard. But ultimately, let me show you what it looks like. This is what GTF looks like when it comes in. It's just a text file. It has latitude and longitude information. It tells you the stop. It tells you the schedule. And you can see that it begins to draw the city. And we're drawing the city here. One of the things that we did in this project is to collect data on informal vehicles, informal stops, and formal stops. Those are the stops that the city designated versus the stops that the matatu drivers designate. And here you can see in blue those stops. But what we were really interested in doing was thinking about how to visualize this mess of data to make it more accessible, not just for our model, but for the public in Nairobi. And we began to kind of pull apart the different routes. This is actually the Thika Road route, where you can see there's actually about 30 different routes going along Thika Road. And we tried to come up with a way to systemize this system and make it more visually understandable. Still, it's a mess, as you can see us pulling apart and offsetting these routes. And what we ultimately decided to do is lay a grid on top of it and make a map that looks very much like a formal transit system that you might see in a place like Atlanta, London, Paris, or New York City. And we started to construct this matatu map. One of the ways that people in Nairobi get around is they get around through landmarks, and we included just the major landmarks on stops as the map. So people will navigate to places like Safaricom or Kara headquarters, and we began to add these layers onto the map. Ultimately, we created an inset, a legend, and a full-scale map for the city. And one of the things that we did as part of this project was really collaborate. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. This is us actually working with the matatu drivers on editing the map. And one of the things that you'll notice is that instantly they noticed that there was a lot of potential for routes in the north of the city. So this totally market-based economy is already planning, and they're actually essentially the planners of this city already. And so I think one of the important things to note is when you're working on a data project, to not just be working with government, but to be working with all of the stakeholders, because in many areas it's people outside of government and in particularly in many rapidly developing cities in the global south, it's those markets that are actually making plans for the city. So one of the things that we did was really engage the local tech community, government, academia, the Matatu drivers, the Matatu Association, local NGOs in the process of our data collection. And really they all felt part of the process and the development of the maps. I think for us, one of the biggest successes was when the local tech community actually started to build their own applications on top of the open data set that we created. And so we held a hackathon with the GTFS data set that turned into 3 different apps. One of them is called Sonar. Another one is called Moth Reroute, which is a kind of Waze-like program in Nairobi, which tells people about traffic congestion, but also will reroute you on your matatu based on kind of traffic patterns. And so really, it's creating the smart city. I call it the smart city from the bottom up, and really leveraging the local tech community to develop these processes. I think another really successful moment of this project is when we got invited to a press conference held by the city to unveil the map as the official map of the city. And here it's the mayor of Nairobi giving it to the governor. And I think what's really important to note here is that the city, even though they were largely disinterested in the project, much of the time we included them, we told them what was going on, and so they really trusted the data enough to acquire it and actually make it the map of the city, which is ultimately what we want. We want it to get out to more people. We want the data to get out to more people, which allowed it to get published in many maps in Nairobi, and it went viral on the internet, and also allowed it to be distributed on billboards across the city, giving more people access to this data. So one of the things I talk about too is that this is an open data project. We were actually giving data out. So how do you measure a success in an open data project? And I think that's when other people leverage your data to generate their own policy change. And so one of the things that happened is soon after we released the map and data, I was at a conference, and UN Habitat is working on a BRT system in Nairobi, and I saw this map of the BRT system. It looks pretty similar to our map, doesn't it? Almost exactly the same. They might have picked up our Illustrator file. So they were trying to use the popularity of the digital Matatu's map to help get their policy through for the BRT system. So running the lines along the same color, calling them the same things, and using that kind of visualization to help affect their policy roles. I think another exciting outcome is since we have worked in Nairobi, I get a phone call almost every day from cities all over the world. This is actually same process that they followed in Amman, Managua, and Cairo, among many. There's a project in Maputo, Honduras, and so kind of people kind of taking the ideas and actually leveraging that for their own cities. Also, Google is using it for their own policy change. They actually have put the GTFS data, because we made it in this data standard, it is now the first informal transit in Google Maps. So you can actually search for your Matatu find your routes on an informal transit system using Google Maps. And this is us at the release. So one of the things that we're really interested in this project is how, informal transit is the main form of transit in many of the world's cities, and how can we use this project to leverage change and access data and really make these smart cities and kind of jump that technology. I'm gonna switch to a much more local data project, something back. We're gonna like zoom all the way back to the US. And I'm gonna talk to you about a project that I did in New York City. And this project is looking at New York City's garment district, which is actually a vertical manufacturing center, which protected zoning in New York City. The garment district is right in the center of Midtown, and in 2010 it was undergoing zoning changes largely from development pressures, the Hudson Yards development here, and many Midtown developments. Just to kind of frame this, the garment district is very high value real estate. It's between the bus terminal and Penn Station, along all these major subway lines. And right now it's protected for manufacturers. That means they get a discounted rent for being in there. And you also have to have manufacturing status to be in many of these buildings in the garment district. And really, there's a lot of pressure to rezone this. If anybody's watched the fashion reality shows, you probably have seen them working in the garment center. And there are very much factories here, and you can see it on the street. And one of the things that I would really say is that fashion is produced in the garment center. It's not the type of manufacturing that you would see in China. It's small runs that then get distributed across the world, right? So these are, I kind of think of it as the fashion prototyping brain. And the fashion designers are extremely worried about the rezoning of this district. They say it's very important to the work that they do. And they said that proximity was essential to the way that they did work. And if they were to relocate the district, it would crush their industry. And so one of the things that they talked about is really it's this interworking between suppliers, wholesalers, reseller, and fashion designers that the garment district allows, and that you go from one trim shop to another store to make your product. But this is not to say that manufacturing is on the decline. 81% decline in United States, and same in New York City. But one of the things that the data shows is that it's actually shrinking to its core. This and this area are two protected areas in New York City, so where you would think it would be being out in New Jersey or out further in Long Island, it's actually shrinking to those areas where it's protected. And about 79% of manufacturing related businesses or apparel manufacturing related businesses in the whole New York City region, and this includes New Jersey, Connecticut, and Long Island, exist in the garment district. And this is just a image of some of the businesses there, with yellow being the manufacturing businesses, blue being supply, and pink being wholesale. So what we wanted to do is, the data was kind of mixed. It's saying this place is really important. The cities are going, come on, you know, proximity isn't that important. Let's move the district. And so there was a lot of questions about how was the district actually working in real time, and how were these businesses operating together. And so we decided to create a study where we took the fashion designer as the kind of brain of the business, and actually tracked that fashion designer using Foursquare and cell phone data check-ins. We had 100 fashion designers that participated in the study and checked into everything they did over a 2-week period. We had large and mid-level designers and also very small designers. We tried to get designers in Brooklyn, Long Island, and across. But one of the things that you can see here from just this raw data analytics is many of them are going to the garment district every day. one of the things that we did is categorize what they were doing. So we looked at every trip they took and the types of things they were doing on trip. And it was really interesting the way that they chained their trips. So actually this person is going to something, New York Beats, Fun to Beats, Tauha Shoho that sells beads, Beads Worlds, Myers Imports that sells beads, QX Command that sells beads. Obviously they're running from their studio looking for a bead and then coming back, which shows the importance of the proximity of the district to do the kind of work that they want. The other thing that we found is that a large amount of the manufacturers that were actually being used were along the 8th Avenue corridor. And this is much of what we had learned from the fashion designers, and that these businesses were being used more. And if you wanted to protect the district, you should protect this part of the district. And just as a reminder, the previous map actually was showing more businesses along the Broadway. And what everybody had been telling us is those are actually not manufacturing businesses. They're architecture firms saying that they're manufacturers, fabricators, other kinds of things that are getting the fashion manufacturing credits. And so our data was actually able to show that more of the active services were here on the edge of the district. We were also able to find that people inside and outside the garment district, so those people that are in the garment district can make 9 trips a day, they can do just-in-time kind of work, versus people who are outside the district spend the same amount of trips, but they make 4 trips per day, and they usually chain their trips. So they're getting the benefit of the agglomeration and the centralization of that district itself. And the other thing that we found that I think is really important is that large and mid-level designers use the district more. Much of the knowledge, or much of what it was thought, is that this was largely something that small designers depended upon. But actually, it was the large and mid designers that were using the district most to develop these kind of runs that then get sent all over the world. And the garment district is a $31 billion industry in New York City. And so the kind of rezoning of the district would affect these designers is the argument we were able to make. Ultimately, they shelved the zoning of the district and kind of changed it to protect the area closer to the 8th Avenue and then opened up. It does need to be rezoned, but we were able to rezone it in a way that was smarter for those businesses and actually open up those areas of Broadway, which actually was a higher value real estate anyways. Related to that, I just want to talk about one project that I'm working on right now, which is just, I'm going to talk about it very quickly because I don't think I have a lot of time, but I've really always been interested in how we can use data as a tool. And so I'm currently have a startup called Envelope, and Envelope actually takes New York City data sets and helps you visualize your zoning. And so in New York City, whenever you buy a parcel of land, there are very specific zoning requirements for that parcel. Usually you have to hire an architect or a planner or a real estate lawyer to figure out these zoning parameters, and it can cost up to $10,000 sometimes to do this. Our tool actually allows you to click on the parcel to figure out the different zoning options that you would have, including if you add, let's say, affordable housing, how much bonuses you would get. If you have a community facility, how much bonuses you get. Also, inclusionary housing bonuses will be included in this tool. And it ultimately allows you to play with your mix of commercial and residential, height bonuses, plaza bonuses, and give you a kind of back of the envelope understanding of what you could build on that property. We're actually releasing the software in the end of September, so hopefully you guys will check it all out. It's called envelope.city, but it's also one of the things we want to do is really be able to bring development to anyone who's interested in doing it. Is in New York City is a very complex set of rules, and this will allow communities to be able to think about their development issues without having to have a huge amount of high-cost assistance. Obviously, you're going to have to get through the approvals and so forth, but this allows you to get through that back of the envelope. I'm going to stop there. I have a lot of other new projects I'm working on with social media data, which I could talk to you about. But I thought it would be really nice to give you an example of clear tools that make smart cities. And I often think that smart cities start from the top, but they can also start from the bottom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for those great presentations. Let's see, we've got about a half hour. I'm going to ask 3 moderately tough questions, I think, and then we'll open it up for anybody who would like to ask a question of their own. I want to start by just kind of coming back again to this question about the dynamics between, the individual citizen, government, private industry. I think each of you have spoken about that to a certain extent, but really sort of from a maybe a cultural perspective, how do you think smart cities affects that dynamic in a way that maybe is new relative to kind of traditional, kind of less, sort of 20th century models of the kind of relationship between those constituencies?
I'm happy. I actually don't think it's new. I think it's very much a throwback to previous ways in which technocratic planning or have sort of leapfrogged or moved around democratic engagement. I think we've seen this movie before in many ways.
I think it's just a new opportunity, like she said, for us to come up with creative ways to get citizen engagement, business communities, and the educational community involved at the beginning, at the inception of it, instead of tail end of it. So I think that's one of the things that we're trying to do with our partnership.
Yeah, and actually that's a much more optimistic comment. But that is one of the reasons that I think that at least I've been so committed to making sure that our partnerships include civic engagement on the front end, not at the back end.
So let me play that back, and then let's please bring Sarah into as well. So you're almost saying, this is another kind of Orwellian, starts top down, but then you see some optimism for a different kind of relationship, a dynamic of kind of, is that, am I getting that right? You said you use the term technocratic, so do you think it starts out as kind of a top-down driven intention to control?
No. I think that the technology is complex and the applications are not clear, right? And so because of that, there's a tendency to step back and say, okay, do the technologists, do the engineers know how to build the bridge? Do the engineers know how to do this? Rather than to do what Sarah was describing, which is to actually go to citizens and say, okay, let's find out what the needs are. Let's find out where find solutions to the actual problems, as opposed to just looking at it as just a question of technical solutions to unspecified problems.
Yeah, I think exactly. Smart cities have always been around. They come back. It's a great buzzword, but I think how we integrate technology in the way that we change cities is super important, and that's really what smart cities are. But I don't think they're new. I think, but I think using the buzzword helps us create a brand new way. It's a market. It's a total market, right? And you are benefiting from that market. And we should all benefit from that market to make the places that we live better places.
But play out the example of the garment district. How would that have worked in the past before your ability to have that level of data, kind of access and acquisition and analysis? What do you think would have happened in the old days?
Well, I think that before we even got involved, that would be considered the old days, and it was kind of an impasse, right? You say this is how you do your work. We need this real estate. Real estate is down. And if you look at the data, the 81% decline. There's a lot of vacancy rates. Yeah, you know, the garment district needs to be rezoned. And it probably may have been rezoned wholesale. In this case, they protected a part of it that's still operative and functioning and allows that part of the business to thrive. But then also they created new offshoots and areas to help the smaller designers grow up, because actually they're not actually using the garment district as much. So it created more of a balance, I think, in how you can create policy. I think in the old days we'd ask questions, we'd use data in the same way. The data was more coarse, right? Maybe is the best way to put it. And that's what I think about the data from technocratic planning days from the 60s and 70s. We had these data sets. I think the people who had very misguided uses of that data thought that they were doing something good, but the data was too coarse to actually answer some of the questions that they were using for it. I would also say in the old days of smart cities, which MIT was heavily involved in, but we also didn't include the voice of citizens in the data set. And I think that's a different way that we're operating with smart cities now, is how can we use these technologies not just to collect data, interpret it, visualize policy, but like collect data about the voice of the citizens so that they can tell us needs and interests, and their issues can be presented as well. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree with you with the new round of smart city. I think what cities learned is that just throwing technology out there and saying, hey, we smart, it doesn't work. So that's that's why it's becoming more of a new topic now, because a lot of them now are trying to have that citizen engagement component of it, which will, one, gain community support for it, which transition into elected official support, which transition into economic support as well.
Okay, next question. So project forward a little bit. What are the kind of top things that you each are working on, let's say, in the next couple of years, the next 5 years? And then project a little bit further out, not Minority Report, but what do you think this is going to look like, kind of as far out as you can sort of credibly imagine? What will civic life look like with this stuff? Are we just talking about another app, a little faster street lights? What do you think, and specific, what's the kind of next thing for each of you?
I mean, I think cities are going under a huge policy transformation as they deal with many of these systems, such as Uber and Airbnb. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a huge amount of regulation around that area. I think that traffic is going to increase through some things like Uber, and we're going to have to think about ways to create Uber buses or Uber. I'm seeing it already, and I don't want to be negative, but I think they're super positive, but they're causing different kinds of urban issues that we haven't faced as cities before, and I think it's going to be a huge topic of work. That's not what you were looking for. You were looking for driverless cars. Yes, they're going to be driverless cars in 5 years, for sure, and they're going to be driving Ubers, and they're going to be everywhere. You don't know?
I have so many different things I have to get done in the next 5 years. I can't just pick one. Wow. But I would say the biggest one and probably the most crucial one from my standpoint in the Smart City Initiative is the actual fiber backbone. Because without that backbone and that infrastructure in place, a lot of this communication technology that you put on the top layer, the sensors and the applications, all the other stuff, won't be able to communicate, at least from the city perspective. So that's one of my top priorities, is to make sure that we get that laid and get a really robust network that can handle the amount of data that we're going to be transmitting. For instance, to give you an example, public safety today is probably our biggest consumer or our biggest user of data right now, just because of the traffic. I mean, of the public safety cameras. They use massive amount of data, and not only the data, the storage part of it as well. So it's just that's probably like my top priority in the next 5 years. To get that completely built out. Where do I see us going, or where do I see us past that? I do see, to me, smart city is not just the technology. It's not, that's not what makes a smart city a city smart. It's more about the educational programs that you have around teaching citizens how to use the technology as well. And sometimes it's just about changing processes to improve efficiencies as opposed to actually throwing technology at the issue. So I think it's just, we would come, and then plus the investment is just so cost prohibitive sometimes that I think in the next 5 to 6 years, we're gonna really find a plan, at least for the city of Atlanta, that really suits the city, not just from a technology standpoint, but from a community, citizen, holistic approach as well.
I didn't say, if you don't like my question, you can answer differently.
No, I mean, I feel like I won the lottery in some ways because this is such a rich research area. I just think it's amazing. And from a policy and urban policy research perspective, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is actively being involved in an extended case method approach here, which is being a participant observer in how this actually plays out. And as it has played out so far, it has really brought clarity to me about some questions about how we develop new markets, right? And how we develop new markets when we've got so many overlapping technologies and voices, right, that are trying to sort of narrow and expand that space and define it in different ways. I also think that it's really interesting, this question, and I think the fiber backbone issue gets to this, is this question, and so does Uber's actually gets to this, the issue of how the urban form is going to be adjusted, and if in fact the urban form will be adjusted in order to manage these opportunities. Now, these are questions that we haven't really had to ask because you have to wait 8 years for a DOT bill, and there's no money for infrastructure except whatever the existing tax base is, which is really ops money, right? For the most part, except for bonds and occasional other things, you really aren't going to make any adjustments to the urban form. Like it's just going to be like this, and this is and you will occasionally be able to do a couple of things for enabling the technology. But if there were actual infrastructure money, a national infrastructure bank, any other financing mechanism, the question of how we will plan for that infrastructure, taking into account this new technology, I think is a fascinating question, and I'm really looking forward to engaging in that. And that is an interdisciplinary question, is the other thing that I think is really key, is that project will be incredibly interdisciplinary.
I just want to add one more thing, and I totally forgot about it while I was speaking. The other thing that I'm really looking to do within the next 5 years is the data warehouse that we're going to be building in partnership with Georgia Tech. I think that's another good, crucial component as well, because then that allows us to take that data, have a place to store it, analyze it, manipulate it, play with it, and for the community to engage to help build solutions off of it. So I think that's the other part of it that's going to be crucial as well.
Perfect segue for my last question, but just in passing, we didn't really get to dig into that question about how form will change, and as a designer, it's a source of fascination to me. I believe that that the nature of buildings, the nature of their physical relationship to urban infrastructure has got to somehow be informed by this, but obviously a question for another day. Last question, it's more of a local question, but Sarah, you can extrapolate globally or whatever region you want to. As a Georgia Tech student or faculty and a citizen of Atlanta, what can I do to get involved? This could be a chance to plug your favorite app or talk about kind of things that you see coming down the pike and how citizens or students can do something to get engaged.
I guess I start that off. And this is just funny because I was literally just talking with Jennifer down there. So from the student perspective, I'm looking at trying to develop a couple of different programs on my team just because it's so new, and I just think it's such a great area for for students and grad students. So one of the things I want to look at is creating a data fellowship. So like I said, we're developing this data portal, this data warehouse with Georgia Tech. So to have a data fellow that can participate on the team would be great. So I'm actually on the city side and currently trying to work to try to get it developed on that end. From a citizen perspective, I'm currently exploring different tools and applications for citizen engagement measurements and participation. So we're looking at building that out. We're still at the very beginning of our Smart City initiative. So I don't have a lot of concrete plans, but that's some things that will be coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I think that's something we've been trying to design for a while is the question of how to get students involved on specific project teams. And since now the Smart ATL is stood up and full, we can actually start to talk about how we do that with the undergrad. We have graduate students now who are engaged in a number of these projects. But I think that the issue of making it easier for students to engage when they can, how they can, and then go back to their studies when they need to is something that we need to talk about.
Yep.
Before we go global, I keep being surprised by the number of interesting apps there are in Atlanta. So there's a smart bike app. I'm bike school. I don't know if you know about that. Maybe everyone knows, but besides me, there's a Beltline app of some sort.
It is.
So there's a lot of stuff already out there that I think, I don't know if I'm the last on the bus, but people I'm not aware of. I keep tripping
Well,
over
and
new
Cycle
things.
Atlanta is a wonderful example of a project that was developed by our faculty and our graduate students here at Georgia Tech, and is actually a wonderful resource for the city, but for citizens too, and can be used for planning purposes as well. And that was how they intended. I mean, that's how they visualized its use, was not just an everyday use, but for a planning use as well.
Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really encourage is I teach a class called Crowdsource City, which every year we partner with civic organizations to build a civic technology app for cities. We've worked with the city of Boston, we've worked with the city of New York, we actually worked with the city of Nairobi last year. I'd love to work with you maybe sometime. I don't want to pull away.
Public-private
But I
partnership,
think,
everybody come aboard.
everybody come on board. But I think one great way while you're in school is to really use the opportunity to prototype, to ask questions, to leverage the resources that you have, to build and experiment in building apps. One of the things that I like to say in my class is that nobody knows how to program when they start, and in the end they built an app, and you guys can all do that. It's not that hard, and you can change your own community that you live in.
Yeah, and I should mention that Data Science for Social Good is a project that the student, that every summer, and often the city is a client for the Data Science for Social Good program, which is student fellowships and organized around projects that can be completed within the summer period.
Great, thanks. So you can either email me if you, or if you have these folks' email addresses, you can let them email me. I will try to get in touch with them.
Beth, I forgot one. What?
Yeah, can I add two more advertisements
Of
to
course.
answer the question? So,
But you have to say who you are.
Are you a tech people?
I'm Beth Lyman, I'm the director of the Institute of People and Technology, and one of Torri's new best friends
Yes.
in a partnership between Georgia Tech and the city of Atlanta. So the week of November 14th is going to be a busy Smart City week here at Georgia Tech. First for students is the Convergence Innovation Competition, and Matt's going to correct me if I get anything wrong, but that is an open competition for innovations in smart cities, and is part of a regular series that we've been holding for the past 13 years. So extremely well attended, lots of good industry participation, lots of great jobs coming out of the other end. So just search Convergence Innovation Competition, Georgia Tech, you can find out about that. For the faculty that seem to be sitting closer to the front of the room. Also that same week, yet to be scheduled, but might even be the same day, leading into CIC, is we have a new Georgia Tech Faculty Council on Smart Cities, and we'll be hosting a Georgia Tech-wide workshop. So a lot of rapid fire presentations of ideas as Georgia Tech also collectively works their heads around these issues. So thank you.
Questions, comments, manifestos, gentlemen in the back, and then
Advertisements.
advertisements.
So,
You have to say who you are, though.
certainly Sarah's presentation suggests that there are all these possibilities for how smart cities will help people who are poor. And yet they're kind of project-oriented. If you look historically, I mean, the competition for control of technology, the competition for control of data, is not to just a really optimistic picture about how you, in fact, engage that. So if you think about a place like Peoplestown or in South Atlanta, and you start to imagine in the next decade how their lives will, in fact, people who live there, how that, assuming it stays in the same population, how their lives would be made better by this. Where do you think that would go? How would you, because citizen participation, if you do it right, the Nairobi example is a terrific example. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of engagement. Right now, the support's coming from foundations. It's, how do you get this to actually be something that's embedded in the way that cities function and spreads these benefits to low-income individuals?
Well, I could take a stab at that. So I have 4 different areas that I oversee, and so I have a communication engagement group. And so one of the things that we are currently doing is we're looking to, as part of our smart city funding that we're seeking from partnerships and things of that nature, we're going to be devoting a large portion of that to, well, not a large portion, but a significant portion of it to that community engagement. So we're going to be going out to the MPUs to do the meetings. We're going to be meeting with the city council. So we're actually going to take the required investment that it takes to get that robust citizen engagement, because otherwise it's going to be hard to really get their buy-in, and you have to go to where the people are. So I'm committed to going to where the people are, thus far, so as city leadership at this point. And so I think that that's the first starting point. You still have to start somewhere. So just the simple surveys is not enough. You actually have to go out, walk the streets, talk with them, go to the meetings, go to the churches, go to where they are to get their input. And so we're committed to doing that as of right now.
Just follow-up questions. Sarah, how did the Garment District project come to being? How did you fund it? Whose idea was it? Was it grassroots kind of thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, it actually started, it was a 2-part project. It started with the Design Trust for Public Space was interested in doing a study of the Garment District, and they had gotten they're kind of an independent advocacy center for public space in New York, and so they wanted to look at the issue. But what they had asked me to do is just look at traditional data sets, see if you could make an argument for why the Garment District should or shouldn't be there. And so some of the data sets that I showed in that presentation showed that, like, you can see that 79% of the industry is there. You can see that it's shrinking to the core, but it was really still, I knew there was tons of vacancy still. And so it was hard, and I really wanted to understand this day-to-day activity. So I actually applied for a grant to the Rockefeller Center to extend the project to actually do that.
Lots of questions.
So I have this perception of smart cities as sort of like a first world type of activity, right? So I have a few questions. One of the first things I thought about was, can homeless people go in, driverless cars and transport themselves? Is that like an acceptable social visualization? Can you see that? Can you see something like that happening? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, does the idea of smart cities sort of push some people out of the economic activity that's going on? Does it like push some people to the side and other people, and it's only like for a privileged few that get to access this? One more quick.
I couldn't tell if you were going.
And also, like, you said that the matatus were a part of Nairobi's culture. What happens when Uber drops driverless cars in Nairobi, and that kind of gets pushed out? You know what I mean? Doesn't that sort of bleach the whole culture of the city? How do you reconcile weaving technology into the cultures of different areas?
Do you want to go for the first question?
I mean, you should expect present trends to continue. So if in fact homeless people cannot get in taxis or Ubers with drivers, they're not going to be, this is, you should expect, unless there's an intervention that actually creates greater equity, current trends are likely to continue, would be my answer. And your skepticism embedded in your question is rightly founded.
But also, I would just say you probably need to take a little broader look at smart city. As I said earlier, smart city is not just about technology. So there are different components or different initiatives within a smart city framework that can address homelessness issues and things of that nature. It just has to be developed and intentional, and it has to be funded.
That is what I was asking. It was skeptical, or skepticism about asking what social issues are this technology looking at, apart from more economic issues.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the digital technocrat optimist, since I can't draw that. I think, these questions of economics and power are ongoing. They've been going on ever since human culture. I believe that the pendulum swings. It feels like we are in actually a swinging toward more stratification of power and economics right now. But I don't believe that is, that it's an inevitable slide that way. We saw, I think, some really interesting examples. I mentioned this very new and very political question about these internet kiosks in New York City. And now there's this pushback because with the local, what do we call those, newspapers, where I guess homeless people are camping in front of those kiosks and just basically being online, and people don't like that, but it happened. So, I guess I'll be an optimist in the sense that I think these dynamics are ongoing and probably will continue to be dynamic.
And just
But this is where planners need to act, and this is why you guys are in school. So these are really good questions to ask. I mean, I think as these services, these are new services. The cab drivers are just as mystified as everyone else. And this is what I was mentioned earlier is, we've created regulation and policy around certain kinds of transport. We don't have those yet in place, and it's up to us to make them and act and take action. So if we think we need a more equalized public transport system that is Uber-like, if we think we need a public transit, do we have an Uber and then a city version of it? I don't know. These are really good questions to be asking, and these are the questions of the next 5 years.
I just want to say one more thing. And so the city also has a chief equity officer that kind of looks at different things of that nature to make sure that certain groups of people are not left behind. And also a couple of years ago, the city stood up a homeless shelter. What's the name of it? I forgot. Oh my gosh. But we stood up a nonprofit entity that started out in the city to address homeless needs. So I might not be focusing on it as part of my project, but we do have a group that I work with to make sure that whatever we're implementing citywide, I make sure that we still take into account their expectations and their needs as well.
Lots of questions. Are we going to try to end on time, or are we going to keep rolling? Two more questions.
So Sarah, I really like the things that you were doing, kind of the bottom-up approach, and with the garment district, you're actually getting into some actual planning issues. But if you look at the smart cities literature, the vast majority of it is how do we optimize systems to make them run a little bit better. And I'm interested, Jennifer started to talk about it a little bit, how do we move beyond just optimizing existing systems and think about where do we invest, how do we plan, how do we build a better city based on big data?
Oh, let me take a stab at that, actually.
Yeah.
I'll go first.
He's like, I'm ready.
Yeah. So that's actually the approach we're looking at. So one of the things that we're doing in partnership with Beth and Jennifer is that we're trying to do a lot of data collecting so we can benchmark and see where we currently are. And we're trying to match that towards what the citizens say their needs are to see if they for one, overlap or if they're the same thing. And then two, what we're trying to do is use that information to actually develop the solutions that are the problems to actually address the actual issues to move the needle in that way. So that's one approach that we're taking from the city of Atlanta. And that's one of the things that the CIO for the city want to do, because everybody always say, oh, transportation is the issue. Transportation is it's the problem. And then when you ask, well, where's the data that shows it? They're like, oh, what you mean data? And so that's one of the approaches that we're actually trying to do, is that before we try to throw technology out there, which is what I said earlier, before we try to throw technology out there first, we want to make sure that we appropriately benchmark it and have data to back it up, so that way we could develop solutions that actually address the problem.
That was a brilliant answer, and I'm going to not make it as brilliant as an answer, but because it responds to Steve's point and to Michael's point at the same time. One of the things that we've been trying to do is say, if we do this as a project by project by project approach, we're not going to be able to get to all of the important nuances. So what we're trying to say is there's got to be a programmatic approach, and that's one of the pillars we have in terms of our process here, is that taking a programmatic approach lets us look at sustainability, equity, and one of the nice things about that too is that it lets us look at the long-term questions of how the data is collected and managed, and think about it as a time series question, as opposed to what happens with a lot of smart cities projects, which is it's all real-time data, right? Those of us who are planners, or policy people are like, I need a time series. I want to know if it got bigger and how much, and if it got, And so what we've been trying to build in from the beginning is if we take look through a programmatic lens rather than a project by project lens, we're going to get a lot further with this whole effort of creating better systems, right? It allows us to do that too. Now, bad news, that's a far more expensive ask than the idea of saying, oh, just let us put the link, kiosks out. We want to deploy 50 link kiosks in New York City and just see how it goes, right? That's essentially the alternative way to do it. You can see what's happening in real time. But we continue to try to push the programmatic approach because we think it's a better approach.
Wow, one more question. Who wants it? The young gentleman.
So I'm actually a design student. I'm kind of working with autonomous cars. And I'm just curious, why do you guys think autonomous objects, autonomous vehicles, for example, are part of the future? Do you think they'll be privately owned, or would it be a public sector, like a ride sharing? What do you see the system would look like for that?
It'll be both. It'll be hybrid. I think initially the price point will be high, but after it becomes more mature, it becomes more vetted, more and more people would then start to migrate to it. And I think the reason why it's going to happen is because companies feel like it is, and they're making heavy investments into it. So as long as a lot of times technology starts in the private community, and so which it has started. So you have Google, you have all these other people that are testing autonomous vehicles. So you can just about imagine that it's gonna be the wave of the future, if the funding makes sense, if the test results they get make sense, if a lot of factors make sense. But I would say it's a safe bet to say yes, it will be in the future.
Today, the police department in New York City, the first person who did ComStats actually retired. I don't know if you guys all know. I just thought it was a poignant Smart Cities moment because he started ComStats in 1994, which is actually data analytics for crime and mapping in cities, and really kind of started a trend in thinking about how to manage cities through data. So it's kind of an important day to have this conversation.
Okay, so a couple real quick closing thoughts. First of all, this is the first of the series of these panel discussions. More to come. Thank you for coming. Thank you also particularly for knocking the architecture program. Please join us again. Thank you so much to our panelists. That was awesome.